Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. We got the little July update, and now we get the second July update. First of all, there was voting on the official Age of Empires site for some of the maps this month. The 1vs1 picks were Four Lakes, Hideout, and Golden Pit, all maps we've seen before. The team game choices were Valley, Oasis, and Lombardia, though remember that every couple of weeks these are going to change. Public voting accounts for just a part of the overall map pool, of course, and the ones nobody ever picks will probably end up being developer picks anyway, so I'm not too worried about a lack of variety. They also added Land Nomad to the mix, which as you might expect is like Nomad, but no water. Personally, I like it a bit better than regular Nomad now, and I even noticed that the AI now tells you where it's going to place its town centers, which is pretty cool. There's also a new preferred map option each time you queue. When it matches you up with someone and somebody has a preference, it'll either pick that map or do a coin flip between your preferred map and theirs. Also, contrary to what you might think, it doesn't appear to intentionally match you with people who share the preferred map. My understanding is it first matches you based on your rating and your geographical location, and then just sorts out the map preferences afterward. You can also go random civ in matchmaking, and if you and your opponent both choose that option, then you'll get random civilizations. Otherwise, you get the civilization you picked. Basically, if you want to go random, then select it, and then just pick a civilization anyway, just in case. Moving along though, let's take a look at some other various random changes. First of all, it seems they fixed a crash when using siege towers. Part of me wonders if this was a bug around from release and that someone just finally made a siege tower in early July. One cool feature they added is that you can now look up other players, so you can see who you recently played against, as well as a lobby ban functionality. I think both of those are nice features. They also added a new feature where holding Alt and right-clicking with a selected unit will prioritize attacks on enemy units, and Alt right-clicking a building or resource will result in a move command instead of another action. The wording of that is a little confusing, but basically if a unit is around some buildings, it can be easy to hit the building by mistake. If you hold down the Alt key now, it means that your units won't be able to target buildings, so it's easier to just click on units. As well, the maximum music volume has been doubled. I've heard of cranking it up to 11 before, but never 20. Now let's move on though and take a look at the civilization balance changes. The first is for battle elephants, who had their trample damage reduced from 50% to 25%. That means they still do their full damage to the one unit they're attacking, and then a quarter of that damage to any units immediately around them. That hurts most against mass infantry or even cavalry, and elephants were, and maybe still are, the ultimate unit against karambits and other swarming sorts of infantry. Elephants were always a bit tough to justify in the mid-game over knights because of their mobility, but I get the sense this is more about curtailing their late game, since that's really when trample damage starts to matter the most. Their HP still makes them good against archers and a good way to soak up damage, but it's definitely a nerf to a unit that has always been a bit situational. Next up, for the Byzantines, the cost of the Elite Cataphract and Logistica techs decreased by 600 food overall. It's always been one of the most expensive units to upgrade, and that food is a bigger deal than you might first think, since when you hit Imperial Age, you usually have a lot of appealing upgrades you want to get, and a lot of them cost food. This change helps Byzantines make better use of their cheaper Imperial Age tech, and maybe will encourage players to make cataphracts more often. It's always been a good unit actually, with its bonus against infantry and negation of some anti-cavalry bonus damage from enemies. The issue traditionally has been the upgrade cost, so I'm glad they focused on that instead of just buffing the unit's stats. Moving on, for the Italians, the Condottiero has had its attack increased by 1, and their Castle Age unique tech for foot archers now adds armor to Condottieri as well. Italians definitely needed a bit of a buff, and it's cool they're playing around with ways to help the team unit. The unique tech, of course, only applies to the Italian Condottieri instead of the whole teams. They now have the same pierce armor as Champion, more HP, on top of not needing to go through 4 different upgrades. Next up, the Koreans had their wood bonus increased. I recently said in my Worst Civilizations video that they're a civ that needed an identity, and at this point they're a pseudo-archer civilization without really excelling at it. The War Wagon and Turtle Ship saw their price raised to offset the discount, so really we're just looking at archery range units and the spear line benefiting, which translates into mostly just an archer buff, since siege weapons aren't affected. Another change was to the Malay, whose Karambit warriors' food cost decreased from 30 to 25. That means they're now 25 food and 15 gold, along with taking up just half a population space. Considering how many of them you normally make, that adds up fast. It certainly makes the choice between Karambit warriors and their goldless two-handed swordsmen a bit tougher. Next up is the Portuguese, who had their gold discount bonus increased, with a corresponding increase to the caravel to make it functionally the same cost. A common theme in this patch is reducing unit cost, whether it's Krambits, Korean units, or upgrading cataphracts. Now, Portuguese 100% needed a boost, and while this doesn't seem huge, they were the worst 1 vs 1 civilization going into the patch, and this is a relatively safe way to help them. That said, it's hard to see this making that big of an impact, and I wouldn't be surprised to see more in future patches to help them. I've always thought their gold discount was solid on paper, both for archers and knights, but for whatever reason it just doesn't seem to translate in practice. And finally, the last change was to the Tatars. I just did the overview on them last week, so of course they're here in the updates. It's not that much of a change though, with just the flaming camel being a bit better against elephants, and their blast radius increased. A half tile increase to the flaming camel's range might not sound that much, but the extra blast radius increases their effective damage area by 78%, though the damage tapers as units get further away. So that's all for the balance changes, and now let's move on and take a look at the tweaks to the maps. Looking through it, I imagine a lot of it is stuff that players wouldn't notice, but there's definitely a trend toward making resources closer and more consistent, which I like, and it takes an unnecessarily random element out of the game. Several maps split resource piles as well, which means you're less likely to completely lose access to stone or gold because of towering. Mega randoms seem to receive particular attention, now with a 1% chance of starting with a Feitoria. The chance of starting with a scout is also down, so expect a lot of alternative scouting, including horses, camels, or just no scout at all. Another focus was on making it so that deer spawn further away from berries. I'm not sure if that completely removes the option of a dual-purpose mill for berries and deer, but I'm actually okay with that being the case. It sometimes feels unfair when one player is able to get that and the other person isn't, as that's a lot of extra food. Moving on from civilization balance, they also fixed a legacy issue where gates rotated to a northeast to southwest orientation would vanish when building a structure adjacent to them. I'm not sure if everyone knew this happened, but it was quite annoying, so it's nice they finally got rid of that. There are also a few changes to the campaigns, but nothing too major. As for the AI, it also has a few cool new tricks. The first is that it now flares the map when it's found an enemy location. This is very common to do online and just helps your team coordinate a bit better. They also addressed an issue where the AI would send way too many villagers against a tower rush. It's definitely still abusable if you can get the first tower up, and the AI is a bit indecisive. I would still consider towering the AI a bit of a cheese strategy. If you try to put a tower up in the middle of a bunch of their units though, they'll fight with nearby villagers, as opposed to before where the whole town seemed to charge you at once, or way back in the day when it would just ignore you. The villagers will also try to fight down a tower if it's alone, but not if you have a group of them, so it's definitely making some progress there. Other than that, it's just a few other small fixes, again just tinkering with it and making it a bit smarter. Another change that I feel like has been promised before is that pathfinding apparently improves the behavior of melee units surrounding tightly packed armies, like archers. Even if it's not a perfect fix, I'm glad it's being addressed and not just ignored. And finally, wrapping up with the event stuff, this month's theme is the Mongols. There's a few new profile icons and challenges to complete, which unlock, for example, the new cheat code Yes We Khan, which replaces Mangadai with Genghis Khan in the Mongolian campaign. That's great to hear, and maybe I'll finally be able to beat the Into China scenario now, except in that scenario you don't start with Mangadai. Classic. So that's the major July patch. It seems like the right things are getting attention this month, and it makes up for the lack of a patch at the end of last month in my mind. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.